Welcome back to Chapter 15. In this second video, we're talking about floating and Flexbox. First thing with floating, it is similar position, but you don't have absolute control over where the elements are floated. Basically, you have the option to create left or right floats, and you can create common or columns, or you can have the elements float around other elements, kind of like a balloon, where you're trying to have an image or some other element, such as a figure, float around text or other elements, making it easier to manage instead of having to worry about exactly where the element will be placed once you place it. So basically, by using float and then a value, the value is none, left, right, initial, and inherit. We'll see exactly what these are in just a minute. Let's take this example again with our yellow box and some text. By default, there is no floating on either of the elements because, well, we haven't set any yet. But as soon as you say float right, then the yellow box itself will float to the right and the text will move up and wrap around it. It won't be exactly based on the dimensions of the element, but as long as the element itself is a square, such as a div box, a table, a figure, or anything else that has a square-based system, or rectangular in any case, then the text is going to wrap around it. If you say float left, then the exact same thing happens, but now the text, which has a text align of left, will automatically line up based on the element that's being floated left, again on the square or rectangle format. The rest of the text kind of wraps around it, which is very nice. If we say float none, then the element itself that was floated does not have floating anymore, so therefore the text is going to appear after the element like there wasn't any floating at all. Let's talk about clearing. So using our previous example, we have the yellow box, we have some text, the yellow box is floated left, then we have an HR or horizontal rule and some more text below it. Well, if we increase the size of the yellow box for any reason, such as a div tag or image or anything else, if we increase it and make it float left, then the horizontal rule and the text will move over, making room for the yellow box. However, what if we want to just have the first paragraph be in line with the yellow box, and then the horizontal rule be displayed below the yellow box regardless of how tall or how big the yellow box is? That's where clearing comes into place. By saying with the HR, we use clear left, then that means that anything that is floated left, the element HR is going to clear anything that's floated left. I know that sounds a little redundant, but hear me out. Based on the fact that the yellow box is floated left, and the horizontal rule has a rule stating that it's clearing anything that is to the left, then since the yellow box is to the left, the HR will go to the next line in order to clear the left floated element. So the first paragraph of text is still there, the horizontal rule moves to the next line, and then the text below that moves as well. This can be a little confusing, so I recommend taking a look at the Code With Me videos to see how this can be used, and also playing around with it to see how different floating and clearing elements can work together. However, sometimes you also want to work with an overflow fix, because if you're going to have things floated, you want to make sure that everything is contained. So let's just take this standard example of some text, and let's add an image to it. Okay, the image is there, the text is below it. Well, once we have the image floated to the right, our text wraps around the image, which is exactly what we wanted it to do. However, if you have a container with something that is being floated and the stuff inside the container that is not floated does not match up with the size of the element, then the text or the content will be shorter, the floated element will be outside the box, and your other items around it won't exactly line up. So what you can do is you can actually use what's called an overflow fix. This is something that most developers should know, and unfortunately, it's kind of a hack. I hate to say it, but sometimes it's just something you have to put in order for stuff to work. So by using the overflow fix, in this case, we're putting it on the yellow box. We say overflow hidden, which means that the actual yellow box will stretch around any floated elements, in this case the image, and make the whole entire container of the yellow box stretch and contain everything that's inside it, including all floated elements. Once you get into more advanced techniques and more advanced layouts, and you have things floated left, right, and in between, you want to make sure you use this overflow fixed, so therefore the elements that are containing the floated items will actually wrap around and contain all the elements that are needed. Some other fixes that you may find online is a common concept called a clear fix. Clear fix is a popular online fix. You can see it in Google and Facebook code, whereas you're using an additional div tag or a line break with the class clearfix. The most common use is just overflow auto, or if you want to get more advanced, you can use a pseudo class and say clearfix after content clear and display. That's a little more advanced than we're going to get into. You don't have to use a clearfix, but if you want to research it, by all means do so. Let's take a look at columns. When creating columns for text, there are many ways to create them, but we're only going to go over two for this actual chapter. You have table-based, which is how things were done back then. We've covered this with tables. It's depreciated and should be avoided in modern coding. You have floating, which we just covered. It's good, but when dealing with columns, it's extremely problematic due to browser bugs and unwanted rendering issues, so avoid this when creating columns. When positioning, it's also good, but it's problematic with responsive design. It tends to look great on computer screens, but not on handheld devices, and not exactly the best way to handle things when they're positioned, so avoid this as well. Flexbox and grid are probably more of the popular concepts that we'll cover, specifically Flexbox. Flexbox is for one-dimensional layouts consisting of either rows or columns, and it's not a single property but a module consisting of several properties, easy to learn and fun, and we'll go over it. Grid, however, is for two-dimensional layouts consisting of both rows and columns. Grid is not a single property but also a module consisting of several properties. However, it has a much steeper learning curve than that of Flexbox. We will not cover grid in this course. Again, we're covering Flexbox. So let's talk about Flexbox. Flexbox is a parent-child structure thanks to CSS3. The parent is known as the flex container. It must have the required property of display and set to flex. That's the only item that is required. Other items that you can use are flex direction and flex wrap. Flex direction determines exactly how the elements should be ordered, whether in a row reverse, column, or column reverse. Row is the default. Flex wrap means that basically if there are more elements than should be displayed, how should the other elements display around the first ones? Should they be wrapped? Should they not be wrapped? Or should they be wrapped in reverse? No wrap is the default. The child elements inside of a flex container, you have the optional item of setting an order and a flex of proportional size. Basically what I mean here is that if you set the proportional size to 9, then it'll take up 90% of the available space based on the elements, whereas 1 is kind of like the non-important stuff that should be minimally sized. I highly recommend viewing this article on CSS tricks to get a better idea about how Flexbox can be used and the different examples of how to use it. But let's talk about a few examples ourselves. First off, let's just say that we have a bunch of div tags that have the same display, same layout, etc. And they're all here. We have, let's say, 7 of them. Based on the fact that Flexbox allows us to order these items automatically, we don't have to float these things to the left or the right. What we can do is we can actually use Flexbox to have these items displayed. This is great for image galleries. This is great for layouts of tables and cells, or different items such as staff biographies, product descriptions, or anything else that you would like to display next to each other and not have to worry about how the items are lined up or how many show up on a page. So by saying automatically, a parent, which in this case is the white box, this is the flex container. We say display flex, which is the required aspect, flex direction row and flex wrap no wrap. That's what we talked about before. Let's go with it. Well, we have 7 elements and there's plenty of space. So, well, the flex direction does exactly what we want it to do. And the flex wrap, no wrap, well, there's nothing to wrap, so it doesn't need to worry about that. But if we have more than 7 elements, say we have 14, then the flex no wrap will automatically space these out on one single row because, well, it can't wrap it. If we take away flex wrap or we say flex wrap wrap, then it will automatically take the elements and push them to the next line. If we say flex direction row reverse, then it will actually take the order of the elements 1 through 7 and put them in the reverse, starting with the right side. The right side will display box 1, going all the way to the left side with box 7. If we decrease the browser size, then flex direction row reverse will still start the first element in the top right, displaying element 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the next line, 5, 6, and 7, automatically spacing these items out. You can actually use margin to automatically have the items positioned in the middle, and I'll get to that once we get to the Code With Me videos. Let's reset for now and just say display flex and flex direction row. But what if we want to have one specific item kind of have an overruling factor versus the rest of the elements? Let's just say this blue box, box number 5. Well, in that case, we could use the property order. And by using a numerical number, we can tell it exactly what the order is that we want the box to show up. However, by just saying order 1, it doesn't do anything because the other elements have no order, and well, the browser doesn't know what 1 is in relation to anything else because anything else doesn't have a set value. So what we can do is we can actually say, come on, we can say the divs inside of the parent has an order of 1 and then the blue box has an order of 0, pushing the blue box, box number 5, all the way to the front of the line before elements 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7 even show up, even though in the code the HTML has not changed at all. We still have all the elements 1 through 7 in that order, but Flexbox allows us to take the blue box, box number 5, and push it to the front. If we say flex 5, as long as we say with the others flex 1, then basically Flexbox is saying that box number 5 should take roughly 50% of the available space, whereas the other elements take up 1. The percentages are kind of hard to determine based on the elements, so if you have 100% of the space divided by 7, take that number, and then each other item has roughly 1/7 of that, and the box number 5 has 5/7 of that, trying to fit in all the space. A little hard to explain. I just recommend playing around with it, see exactly what it can do, how things work out, and learn a few things along the way. Now for grid is more robust than Flexbox in many ways, but it is much harder to learn. I recommend taking a look at this article on CSS tricks just to see exactly how grid can replace Flexbox, but it doesn't actually replace it. It just talks about some of the advantages, disadvantages, and how you can use it in certain situations. Is grid a replacement for Flexbox? No, not really, but it also depends on what you're trying to use it for. Okay, that is all of Chapter 15. If you have any questions about this or anything in Chapter 15, please send me an email or hit me up on Twitter. I'll get back to you with the best possible answer. Until then, take a look at the Code With Me videos and learn a few things about Flexbox, positioning, and floating.